And Gail Bradbrook is an Extinction Rebellion spokesperson and joins me now. Gail, are you actually out the protest, Gail?
I'm just a few metres away in St. Peter's Church because it was a quiet space to do this interview.
Oh, great. Okay, well, thank you for the time you're taking to talk to us. What do Extinction Rebellion want to achieve by these protests today?
We have an immediate demand of the government and the fossil fuel industries and the finances of those industries to say that there must be no new investments going forwards in fossil fuels. As people are aware, 85% of the British public are aware, we have entered this crisis. It's now a time when the jet stream is breaking down and we're getting these incredible weather patterns. We have no time to lose in acting. And if leaders are serious about this crisis in both business and government, obviously what they do is stop literally pouring more petrol on the fire by funding new fossil fuel investments.
But the leaders of this country are serious. I mean, we saw Alok Sharma going on television just last week, the week before, after the UN report, saying that serious changes needed to be made. We have agreed that we are going to become a climate neutral country. Most fossil fuel powered vehicles are moving over to electric. As a country, we only are responsible for, 1% of the world's carbon emissions. I don't know anyone that doesn't recycle. I don't know anyone that isn't more conscious about their choices around the environment than ever before. So haven't you actually achieved your goals?
Unfortunately not. The UK is facing an existential crisis. It's the kind of times that are even worse than what we faced in the Second World War. And they will need and require us to step up and change in ways that we have not yet faced. And that's why we've put a pink table in the middle of the streets to say that we need to come together and have talks about what this takes. But, Lord Deben, who is the chair of the Committee on Climate Change, the government's own body, he says we still haven't yet seen the delivery programme. We are the fifth biggest emitters of carbon historically, and our carbon footprint actually went up in recent years. So unfortunately, we are not doing what is necessary to tackle this crisis. And you simply can't argue with physics when you've got things like the weather effects that are already happening that will mean that people will not have enough food to eat.
But you don't disagree with the figure that we're responsible for, I think, 1% or so of the world's carbon emissions?
It depends how you do the calculations, actually, because what we tend to do is to ignore the emissions from aviation and shipping and consumption. And it's also about who funds this crisis. So 15% of the funding of new fossil fuel and biodiversity wrecking projects comes from the UK. And what you've had is the UK government saying many good things, but in reality, what they do is carry on financing. The government itself carries on financing things overseas and extractive projects, for example, new gas fields in Mozambique. So it's saying one thing and doing another.
And what do you actually want when it comes to our economic system? There's been a lot written in the press before about how one of the things that you object to, and perhaps you could clarify this, is capitalism, and that we need to be moving towards a different economic model in order to facilitate a lot of what your demands are. To what extent is that true?
Yeah, well, so basically what we say is we need a grown-up conversation about our economy. And there are people, including amongst our spokespeople, Chidi Osiobinhara, who's a former banker, who's pro-capitalism. So we are a broad movement. I mean, I personally would say I don't think we have a functional form of capitalism. It's so very corrupted. We've got trillions of dollars hidden offshore, for example. That's not functional capitalism. And when you've actually got governments subsidising to the tune of millions of dollars per minute fossil fuels, that's not functional capitalism either. So what we want is a grown-up conversation. The issue is, unfortunately, you cannot have economic growth and tackle the climate crisis.
Well,
so you have to move to a
if you
different
use
system.
capitalism in order to...
You can, by the way, have some sectors growing, but you can't have economic growth for the sake of it.
You see,
and I just want to...
because the problem is, this is the problem. You have taken me, right, who is probably quite balanced and not very extreme when it comes to this issue, and organisations like yours, virtue signallers like our mayor, who is a total hypocrite when it comes to being driven around in a 5-litre Range Rover, Boris Johnson producing 7 children, Alok Sharma taking 60 flights, Prince Harry lecturing on climate whilst getting in a private jet, your organisation calling for an end to capitalism, making my life...
We don't call for an end to capitalism, just to be clear.
Oh, okay, well,
we say that we need to redesign the economic system in the similar way that people like Professor Mariana Mazzucato talks about having a mission-based economic system. That's about bringing the best of what we've got already, not throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
That says to me tax rises, though. That says to me tax rises. How can you convince me that what you are actually calling for won't cost people like me and people who are hardworking, who are hopefully trying to just make ends meet in a decent way? What you are calling for won't ultimately mean more tax rises for them.
So basically, this crisis has to be paid for. Let's bear in mind that there are 90 billion pounds annually in the UK of uncollected taxes. If we stop subsidising the fossil fuels, we could use that money. If we stop doing this mad project called HS2 that's set to cost 200 billion, we could use that money. If we don't go ahead with 27 billion of roads building programme, we could use that money. Ordinary people can't afford to pay for this crisis.
Why don't you want HS2? Why don't you want a train system that has the capacity to stop us wanting to fly domestically?
We need to upgrade our train system in the UK, but HS2 is basically an aviation and airport shuttle service. When Boris announced it, he said it would help people to get to Birmingham Airport quicker than they could get to Heathrow. Birmingham Airport have been investing in expansion of aviation off the back of HS2. So it's not about upgrading the train system. It'll be too expensive for ordinary people to afford. So, I mean, there are lots of ways that we could go about tackling transport as an issue, for example.
The problem is that there's so much hypocrisy here. Sadiq Khan, who says he stands right behind you, gets driven around in a 5-litre Range Rover and drove 4 miles over the weekend in order to walk his dogs. Didn't you? It was reported, I think, in 2019 that didn't you go to Costa Rica and stay at a luxury resort and take up 11,000 air miles in order to...
I went to tackle a health issue, and I couldn't do the thing that I wanted to do in the UK because it was illegal. But what I would say, love, is that we're all hypocrites in the face of this crisis. We're all culpable.
Well,
we all do things.
Situation are you to lecture others and close down roads? Like, you're going to stop people being able to go about their business on a day-to-day basis when you yourself have not changed your behaviour enough, and that is the perception of Extinction Rebellion, that they're sort of middle class people who all do what they're not supposed to do and then tell us that we're all terrible.
I mean, there's a lot of divide and conquer that happens, actually. My dad was a coal miner, by the way. I'm a working class person, but the point here is what you try and say is, oh, you're too middle class, and the next minute, oh, you're dole scrounging, you need to get a bath. I mean, whatever you want to say about us, there'll be some truth in it, and mostly it's just a bit ridiculous, because we're just ordinary people that are saying there's this crisis here and we've got to tackle it.
But practicing what you preach is not ridiculous. The assertion that you should practice what you preach. When did you last go on holiday then, Gail?
I last went on holiday. I had a little city break. I went to Bristol. Okay. I live in Stroud.
And how did you get there?
I mean, listen, you can definitely find things about my life. I mean, I've spent a lot of money on my house, put solar panels on it. I had to take out insulation and reinsert it.
Isn't this the problem, then,
I've done lots of good things, but I also don't get it all right. And, I drive a car, for example. What I'd really like
an electric car, right?
No, because I can't afford it.
So what car do you drive?
Give me £5,000, you can convert my car to electric. But
what car do you drive?
But it was claimed to be a really green car.
What is it?
At the time when I bought it, I'm one of those people who just don't like cars, so I can't remember, but it is a diesel car. It's not cool. But basically,
diesels are terrible.
Convert these cars. You can convert them, but you need money to do that. And what I was thinking was, wouldn't it be great if some of us, I'd be willing to do it, could give our cars into community ownership, get them converted to electric. So if anybody wants my car, and they can pay for it to be converted to electric, and other people can share it, they're very welcome.
I don't want to live in a life
of... I can't get my kids to sports fixtures. They're both into football and rugby. I do lots of lift sharing, but I can't get them there because we don't have buses that run including
Firstly,
on a Sunday.
I don't.
Some of the things are systemic issues, aren't they?
But I don't want to live in a world where I have communal use of a car, firstly. But secondly, aren't those the sacrifices we have to make? Unfortunately, your children are going to have to play their sports slightly more locally rather than you getting into a diesel.
No, they are playing them locally, love, but it's a very hilly place, and even just a few miles, you can't get there on an electric bike.
But we're being told here in London that active travel has got to be within 15 minutes. No, of course it's personal. How can you say it's not personal? You're asking me and you're asking politicians to change my life personally, so of course it's personal. And if you drive a diesel, respectfully, if you take a holiday that takes up 11,000 air miles, and then you're asking me or asking politicians to enforce rules that make me change my life, of course I'm going to say you're a hypocrite.
Well, you can go the hypocrisy route all you like. Every person is trying their best to do what they can in this system also needs systemic change. We have to have a functional public transport system. For example,
bicycles.
We should be able to do our health issues in the UK, not have to go overseas for them. But individuals can only make so much change. And actually, what we say in Extinction Rebellion, as I think you know, is that we want deliberative democracy where ordinary people decide. Now, what's already happened in the UK is that there was a climate assembly. And experts spoke to them, including Sir David Attenborough and others, and they went through a deliberative process. And what they said they wanted, so representative ordinary British people, was a frequent flyer tax. That's how they wanted to tackle the aviation issue. And on many subjects, that's what we need to do, is have ordinary people deciding. It's not for me to decide. But what people need to understand is when you're facing is an existential threat, right? Civilization on the pathway that we're on currently is very, very likely to collapse.
But
you don't commentators think.
With respect, those words don't go through your mind when you turn on the engine of your diesel.
Every day when I do things that aren't cool, I wish that we could do it differently, that I could do things differently. And I got here by public transport. I mean, come on, can we just move on? We're talking about
because it's the point. It's the absolute point.
We're talking about weather effects that mean there won't be enough food around. They said it'd be 2040 Anglia-Ruskin University, and now there's a MOD report saying it's 2030.
All right.
It's called multi-breadbasket failure when there's not enough food in the world. And you want to just discuss whether I'm using my car.
That's absolutely what I want. You are a representative of Extinction Rebellion who wants to campaign for the government to stop us using fossil fuels whilst you drive a diesel. I mean, again, how can you possibly, if we are going to hold our politicians and representatives to account based on their behaviour, well, I'm afraid, Gail, that you've put yourself in the position where that is also going to apply to you. You're being a really boring
interviewer, mate. You're really...
Why am I being a boring interviewer?
We have to change the system, love. It's really clear. And the other thing is, if I was really perfectly green...
I haven't been personally rude to you.
Oh, you want us all to go back in the caves like you, Gail. You want us all to give up.
Well, I haven't actually said that, but I also I haven't been personally rude to you, Gail.
It's just like can we just talk about the reality of this crisis?
The reality of this crisis centres around people's personal behaviour.
Is by carbon rationing, like we had to do in the war. Everybody gets this much
carbon. The reality of this crisis, Gail, is down to people's personal behaviour. And your personal behaviour is not that of someone
I'm breathing out carbon dioxide now, mate. Do you want me to stop breathing? I mean, come on. Grow up a bit. This is a bit stupid.
No, well, it's not stupid. It's holding your behaviour to the same account you expect other people's to be held at.
That's how it is.
Okay.
And if we want to change it, we have to change the system.
Any other personal insults you want to throw at me, or are we done now?
I'm just telling you, why don't you ask more interesting questions? We've been on this one for 5 minutes. Just
because
ask the
your
best question.
behaviour is pertinent to this debate when you expect to change other
Yeah, but
people's.
literally everybody in the UK has a carbon footprint, love. And if we want to change it, some of it's about personal change. You do what you can. And if I was here lecturing everybody to be absolutely
That's exactly what you're
perfect,
doing. You're there
then you'd be
lecturing
also
people.
calling me out.
That's exactly what you're doing. You're there lecturing people. Listen, Gail, though, I'm afraid we've got to leave it. That's what you are. You're protesting. And what do you think protesting is? It's trying to tell people to change. That's precisely what Extinction Rebellion are doing. But Gail, I appreciate you disagree with me. Gail Bradbrook, Extinction Rebellion spokesperson, live in London. Hideously late for the news headlines, but here they are on Talk Radio.